Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. We're now on Red Circle as well as Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Also, check out fivereasonsports.com. Spell that out. We do not have a paywall. And check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network, our fantasy and betting partners, our fantasy partners Prize Picks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Get your initial deposit matched up to $100. At Better Edge, use the code 5RSN. That's the number 5RSN. And get $20 free to play. And that's peer-to-peer gambling. Like Prize Picks, totally legal in the state of Florida. So go to prizepicks.com, use the code 5FIVE, Better Edge, that's with an O, betteredge.com, use the code 5RSN. And now, tonight's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all band. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust. It's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
Yo, what is going on? It's Alex Toledo here with Brady Hawk. No Ethan Skolnick tonight. No Greg Sylvander, my guy Leif, covering the game in Charlotte, North Carolina tonight. Feel bad for him. That was a tough one to watch. At least it wasn't a blowout, right? I'll start there. But no, in all seriousness, this was, I think, and I was talking about this with you pre-show, Brady, in some ways a repeat of what happened in the last Hornets game, where there was some sloppy effort. I think the defensive effort was much better tonight, much sharper than it was last night after things got tough, specifically. Whereas once the Hornets got that lead going, the Heat actually got sharper as a team defensively, the opposite of what happened last night, right? So I'm trying to start off with some of the positives here. I'm going to save one that's coming into my head for later on in the show. But really, like this offense, you expect some things, right? You expect them to not make threes, right? And that happened again tonight, 11 of 35. You didn't get absolutely doubled up by three like they did last night, where the Hornets only made 10. The problem was, and this has not been the case all season, was also that the Heat shot 3 of 16 in the mid-range. They've been a very good mid-range team despite the high volume. They've been efficient from there all season. That was not the case tonight. I think Jimmy did his thing. Tyler had a rough start, but got a lot better as the game went on, had a big fourth quarter. And then things just did not go well in crunch time. They got out-rebounded again, second straight game, after being a very strong rebounding team offensively and defensively in the year 2023. Before this stretch here with the last two games, like they were second in defensive rebounds, seventh in offensive rebounds in the year 2023. And I'm just staggered right now because it's been 2 straight games of that. 2 straight games of them not making their mark defensively with turnovers, losing the points off turnovers battle. So not only is the offense still bad, I know I'm kind of long-winded here, but the defense, you know what I mean? The defense is not as sharp as it needs to be. And then there's stuff offensively that's not working. They're getting out-rebounded. I don't know what to say, man. I thought this was going to be the opposite of how they came out after, this extended break. I thought guys were going to have fresher legs. Maybe some more shots were going to go down. Brady, I'm finally going to hand the ball over to you. I've been holding it for too long. I'm just absolutely left speechless despite how long I've been going here. And I just want to ask you, what are your biggest takeaways from this game? Like just the fact that they were able to, I guess, bring it down from a 22-point deficit down to 3 and make it a game. That's cool. Nice. But other than that, it's hard to say anything else positive about this game.
For sure. I mean, look, let's start with the fact that this is the Hornets. Like making that run is cool and all, but it's like this is a game that you're supposed to get, especially after the performance you just put up the night before. But I'll start with the fact the defense you were mentioning. We shouldn't be shocked. Like that's where I kind of start with it. Is like you look at the roster tonight, and you see the 10 guys that they're playing, and 5 of them are not supposed to be anything close to elite defenders. So you're basically looking at the fact you're not only extending your rotation one slot, which I'm fine with, but you're kind of playing weird rotations in lineups that are not going to favor defense. What they're basically favoring, and they've shown this in the last 2 games, they're saying we are fully leaning and betting on shooting well or scoring well in general, even if it's not the shots. And that's not happening. And if that's not happening, we know for sure the defense is going to be leaking. And so that's kind of what we've seen, I guess, defensively. These lineups are not supporting that. They've had an identity in past weeks, months, where it was basically, the shots and the shooting and the percentages look the same as they do now. But they were defending well. They were forcing turnovers. They were kind of doing that stuff because they were basically, we kept joking around about the clutch games. Part of the reason was just because the defense was that good that it was going to be 85 to 84, it felt like, every game because of just the lineups they had out there. It was going to be gritty. It was going to be in the mud. Getting to the offensive side of things, you have Tyler, who started right, I think, around 0 for 5, 0 for 6, and then he just comes back and he started getting into a little bit of a rhythm. He was one of the few positives, I guess, later in the game. You had Jimmy Butler, who I'd say it's a pretty similar storyline in back-to-back games. Like 2 games in a row, he is not hitting. He's like, he's super efficient, but not on high volume. And part of the reason is just because he's getting to the line. He has 20 free throw attempts. Jimmy Butler had 20 free throw attempts against the Charlotte Hornets, and they lost. Like, you got supreme aggressive Jimmy Butler in a game like this, and you lost. And what does that say? The supporting cast just isn't there. Things are probably more complex than just a simple stat sheet that I'm going to look at right now, but it's really not. Like, when it gets down to it, let's just start and go through some individual guys real quick. You go through Gabe Vincent, who did not shoot a shot until the 4th quarter. He ended up shooting 5 in the game, but 5 of them all came in the 4th. He did not shoot through the first 3 quarters. You go down into the bench. If you Cody Zeller had 4 points in this game. He had 4 shot attempts, 2 of 4. If you kind of count him out, you have Max Strus, who was 0 for 3. You have Victor Oladipo, who was 0 for 5. You have Duncan Robinson, who was 0 for 1. Duncan Robinson, I was saying this to Alex before we started this, played 6 minutes. He was a minus 17. Like, that is hard to do. And I'm not putting this all on Duncan Robinson because that is far from the case. But that is just a wild stat to look at in general. And that kind of sums up the role players. Like, it really does. It sums them up specifically tonight, where it's basically, it's Jimmy, it's Tyler. We're going to get to Kevin Love, I think, at a separate later on. And then it's Bam, which I did not think Bam had far from his best game tonight. Like, he was 6 of 14, and it just felt like he was a little sluggish out there offensively at times. Like, it did not seem like a strong Bam game. But I'm not even going to put this on him as much as we're going to look at that. Like, it really comes down to role players. Like, the thing that got them in so many games, the thing that kind of pushed them in the direction of a 1 seed last year, they're basically getting donuts from across the entire roster in a box score. And it's just like, if you're going to lean on offense and put out like roster and rotations and substitution patterns that are not going to be strong defensively with the kind of putting 3 negative defenders on the floor, you cannot have all of your specialists putting up 0 points. So it's like, it feels like a lot of the time it's really that simple. So I don't know. I mean, they made a run. They got a rhythm a couple of those times, but it's like they had around halfway through the 2nd quarter. What did they have? 24 points? Like, it's just, that is a tough thing to do in this modern NBA.
Man, it's crazy that you say that. And E. Reed was giving some great stats throughout the broadcast, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but he had said that essentially in that 2nd quarter run, the last 6.5 minutes or so of that 2nd quarter, they scored at either the same amount or more than they did in that up to that entire game. I mean, up to that point in the entire game, excuse me. Like, it's just unbelievable how bad their offense can look against a bad defense. I'll just say it. Understanding it's a second night of a back-to-back on the road. The Hornets are also on the second night of a back-to-back. There's no excuses. You had to win this game knowing that you have some playoff opponents coming up now in the schedule in the month of March, even though there's a lot of home games and they've been much better at home. So there's the positive there. But I agree with a lot of what you were talking about there. First, with the lineups, I was going to say Duncan shouldn't be in the rotation anymore, even though before the break we were saying maybe it should go back to him. That was obviously before the acquisition of 2 more frontcourt players, specifically Kevin Love. So, who was already looked at as sort of a one-sided player other than what he does on the defensive boards, and is somebody you got to cover up for on defense. That kind of takes away the flexibility of throwing Duncan in there because there's already too many guys you're covering up for, not to mention Tyler Hero, who was getting hunted tonight a couple of different times throughout the game. You got Max Strus out there who's been struggling just so much. I feel really bad about the way that him and Victor Oladipo look specifically. I think Depot, ever since coming back from injury, has looked very, very hesitant on ball, has kind of dribbled into a lot of pull-up shots in between and not necessarily like great looks. It's not like, oh, they're just completely sagging off. And, some of them are okay, but, he's not even trying to get into the paint like he was before. And it felt like that's kind of where he was getting some offense going off the bench and getting the playmaking and the playmaking opportunities and assists were flowing off of the, pick and roll and him getting downhill. We're not seeing that anymore. He's not even doing that. I think defensively he's still strong, so that's good. But it's looking like you've got a lot of one-sided players, and then some of the, quote-unquote one-sided players are not even performing well on that one side they're supposed to be good at. They're not hitting their shots. It's a big problem. And then I don't know. I think they've got to figure out the rotation. I think they got to figure out the lineups. I think tonight was a little bit interesting because we saw some minutes of Love at the 5. Another night of, you'll see 1 or 2 minutes where Love and Zeller will play together. So it's interesting to see Spo try to work his way through it. But I'm with you. I saw you were saying this on Twitter, either shorten the rotation or play Highsmith. And I'm kind of the mind, play Highsmith, just go back into leaning defense. I thought he was giving you some strong playing time as the season went on. I think he helps you with creating the turnovers. And it's just like, the threes are not falling. Get over it. The dunking thing is not going to work at this point now that you've added Love into the rotation. If you're going to go 10 deep, I think you got to figure out the lineups more, whether or not you're playing Highsmith. And now that I'm done with that, I wanted to ask you what happened in crunch time, because they've been a pretty good crunch time team this season specifically. I thought there was a couple of defensive mistakes, even though they definitely were much sharper, and I thought we're pretty sharp in general in the second half defensively. It kind of came apart at the seams towards the end, and I wanted to pick your brain there to see what you thought happened towards the end of the game.
Yeah, it was weird because, for one, we talked about clutch time so much because they've been in so many of these situations. I was looking at some of the play-by-play stuff just now because it felt like they kept getting to like a tie game, like at least 2 or 3 times toward the end of the fourth quarter. But they literally, it's like a cliche phrase, but they literally could not get over the hump. Like they could not get past the tie game allegations. Like it was like basically they could not push past it. 2 minutes ago, Bam had like that one dunk. It was actually a pretty good play. Tyler got like a little bit of rhythm. Then Bam had a dunk where actually like they ran like an inverted pick and roll for him. Jimmy screened for him. It was like, I was like, okay, wait, they're getting a little bit of a rhythm here. They're actually running stuff for Bam here down the stretch of the game. And it felt like defensively, it was not only like the stuff with some miscommunications, but it felt like there was so many opportunities where they just kept getting offensive boards. Like there was right after that dunk, I think it was the one where LaMelo shot a bad shot, deep 3. He ends up getting his offensive board. And then right after that, Bam goes into transition. It's a turnover. Like it was just kind of sloppy stuff. Like that was kind of my primary takeaway from it. And, talking about so many of the stats, the one thing we didn't mention was, we talk about Bam's stats, but Mark Williams on the other side has 18 points and 20 boards. Like we can't really look past that when there's
probably start over Plumlee.
when you get to a point like that, when the guy is basically putting up those type of numbers and grabbing 20 boards, and he's doing it in crunch time because he had shortly after, like I'm even looking at the play-by-play right now. It's like 44 seconds to go. Rozier missed the jumper. Mark Williams offensive rebound, and he puts it back for a dunk. And that was the play where Jimmy was frustrated. Love is staring at the rim for 44 seconds. And it seemed like he was having those moments a lot under the rim, kind of just looking around after offensive boards. But it was like, you just can't have those lapses. If you're going to like get stops by some degree and you're going to force tough shots that they kind of were doing, you just cannot give up those easy putbacks, and you cannot have these offensive plays where you're kind of giving up turnovers in crunch time. So, they kind of did it to themselves. Like I said, they just could not get over the hump even when they did good things. So, but if I'm going to be honest, like this is one of those games where I walk away, and even if they won this game, I don't think I would have had this takeaway, but it's like, I'm not blaming it on the end of this game. Like it's everything else. Like it was the stuff that they did way before that. It was the fact that they couldn't get over the hump in the first quarter. It was the fact that they couldn't get over the hump in the third quarter when they kind of got back into it toward the end, toward halftime. Like those are more the issues I feel like generally than the stuff, I guess, late in the game.
Yeah, man, they've got some issues now because I think we know that their offense is so heavily reliant, obviously too reliant, I think we know at this point in the season, on their defense and forcing turnovers, and not to harp on that so much, but when you don't do that, it's just so much pressure on not just the offense in general, but Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler to be very, very good. Like there's too much pressure, I think, for them to have good to great scoring nights in order for you to just get a win on a regular season night. And it's a problem because you just know you're not going to get enough relief shooting from the three. I think there's usually a standard of, okay, well, they're going to do pretty good in the mid-range that, like I said before, just without even having to look it up, I know that was their worst mid-range shooting night this season because 3 of 16 is terrible. And like I said, they've been very good at it. But, man.
Part of that is Bam, by the way. I just want to throw that in there because we were talking about kind of his rough game. But, like, Bam is so major to their mid-range looks. Like, if that's kind of their whole diet.
Yeah, man. And I think it's tough because I don't know what's going on with Bam against the Hornets recently. You would think that would be a matchup where he would succeed in. And look, shout out to Mark Williams. Like, he's no scrub. Not that, NBA players are not scrubs in general, but, he's a talented young big, and he did what he needed to do tonight, did a great job, and just caught the Heat lacking, man. It wasn't all him, but, Hayward had a strong performance. I thought, we talked about this pre-show as well, that even though LaMelo didn't shoot well, it felt like he had a much better game. Maybe it's just because of how streaky he is offensively, but he just creates so many, I think, good looks for his teammates, even despite some of the erratic passing. Very fun to watch. But now that we're through talking about the game overall, let's get into what everybody wants to talk about, is the newly acquired Kevin Love. Before we get to him, shout out Prize Picks. Use promo code 5, and shout out Better Edge. Use promo code 5RSN. And shout out Cody Zeller, who, didn't do much tonight compared to last night's monster stat line off the bench of 10, 7, and 3 or something like that. And the lowest, the highest plus minus individually on the team in a terrible loss. Tonight followed it up with, I'm not looking at it right now, I believe 4 points, 3 rebounds. He was fine. Right, so I'm just going to say that because he's the other acquired big man. I think he's been fine in the minutes. He basically took up the slate of minutes that Orlando Robinson was playing in, and it's a small upgrade, but it's an upgrade nonetheless. And I think having that extra big body who just knows where to go and what to be is an upgrade. Even though sometimes I think he comes up a little bit too high when he's defending the screen, and it doesn't feel intentional. It doesn't feel like a game plan thing, because it'll be like he's defending a drop, and as the ball handler gets closer into the paint, he comes up to kind of contest, and I think it kind of opens up things sometimes down low for the big, and the drop down pass specifically to the big. That's a random thing that I just kind of came to my mind during the game watching him, but I think otherwise he's pretty solid, moving pretty well, doesn't look too slow. Now for Kevin Love, big time bounce back game specifically on offense, which is what you're kind of expecting from him. Put up a 13-13 double-double. Right, so he snatches up a lot of rebounds. Good to see him make some threes. He got an easy bucket in the paint. I wanted to ask you what you thought of him, and specifically the way that they were able to manage the rotation and the defense around him. You saw more of what we saw last night, as far as a lot of showing and recovering on the screens and a lot of blitzing on the screens. Which one of those do you like better? Do you like them both equally? And how do you feel about him, not only as a starter, but as a closer? Because he was a closer tonight. And for me, I think it's a matchup thing. Like, I think even though I've said I don't know if he's a closer because of the defensive concerns, I think in the playoffs you might have to close with him at times because of how big some of these specific matchups are, depending on who we're talking about. But I think nonetheless it's good to have the weapon. And I think they still have some things to figure out as far as what are the right lineup machinations. And I know this is a loaded question, but yeah, what do you think about the way that they're managing him defensively as a team, and what do you think about his fit in the rotation so far as a starter and as a closer?
So I'll start with the defensive stuff. They basically showed this is what they love to do with any type of big, but like you were talking about, they're going to just basically show and recover in that way. They're going to blitz out in that way with Kevin Love, which I think makes a ton of sense. Like, I feel like they can do it. It's what they're good at. This team has always relied on kind of those backside rotations. So I'm fine with that aspect of it. The one thing that I kept noticing that most of the miscommunications with Kevin Love were actually coming with Bam. Like, when they were kind of in similar actions. Like, there was some points where, like, he didn't know if they were supposed to switch it with each other, or if they were just gonna just kind of go through it. Like if that's some like part of the wrinkles that I think they need to figure out, because those were more the issues, and like you were mentioning, kind of the interior stuff. That's more of them two than anything. Like the guard stuff is pretty simple for him. It's just blitz out and try to recover as best as possible, and the other guys are going to cover up for you. So I feel like that stuff's pretty self-explanatory. It's just kind of get those other issues flattened out, I guess, moving forward.
Bam got to be closer to the rim. I think when you're having Kevin Love come out, so to the 3-point line, I think Bam's got to be somewhere close to the paint. He's got to be there. I think that's the whole point of this, right? He's got to be the low man.
And if Bam's pinching, it's kind of the looks that they're forcing anyway, because we know the Heat are forcing basically those corner threes and late closeouts. So it's schematically, it's kind of what they do anyway. So it definitely would make sense to do that. When it comes down to his performance, I guess offensively, he has 13 points, 13 rebounds. I thought he was definitely good on the boards. Like I know that we were joking about some of the stuff with him looking around off some offensive rebounds, but he definitely swarms for the boards and ends up getting kind of crashing in that way. Offensively, it seems like, this is exactly what you'd want from Kevin Love. Like a nice little 13-point performance. I mean, you obviously want him probably to be a little bit more efficient. He was 3 of 9 from 3, but it's like the only reason the fact that you need more is because everybody else isn't holding up their end of the bargain. Like if everybody else was doing their job, you'd be like, okay, this is exactly what you kind of need from Kevin Love. Just like 3 triples in a certain night, you get a little bit offensively, get some rebounds. This is exactly what you'd want. So I don't think there's anything, any problems in that way. When it comes down to your other question, in terms of finishing and closing, that's where I go a little bit different, because I just don't know. Like I don't know if I'm totally there yet. I don't know if he's a closer on this team. I just don't think so. I think if they're not going to be good offensively with him on the floor or without him on the floor, put your best defenders on the floor. like you're going to have Tyler out there closing. Let Tyler be out there with 4 decent defenders and just try to close that way. I don't see a reason to try to just kind of overcompensate offensively if neither way you're going to be, extremely good from 3 or just scoring in general. So in terms of closing, I still think they need to figure it out, because as much as I've preached and talked about they have 4 closers, you look at Depot tonight and it's like he doesn't look right now. Like he doesn't look right offensively. He doesn't look comfortable. His shot is just basically being forced because they're leaving him open. He just keeps kind of just pressing. It's tough to even look at, they have 3 closers. And right now at this exact moment, they have 3 closers, and you got to fit 2 guys around them. And I really do think, and, that's why Depot still is in this discussion, but they need 2 defenders around those guys. They just do. And it's like, that's the way they have to approach this, because this team is not built to just outscore you. They're going to be a team that can maybe force more turnovers. They can out-turnover you, but they're not going to outscore you. So I liked what you saw from Kevin Love. I think this is ideally what you'd want if everybody else is looking, at least doing somewhat of their job. But yeah, I don't know if I'm at the closing part yet. And he was, before he entered, he finished with 26 minutes. Before he entered, to finish the game, he was already at 21, 22 minutes. So I actually thought he was done for the night.
Yeah, me too. I was surprised to see him come back in the game. I was interested to see, because, especially with closers, Spo will handle it. Like you said, he's got 3 with Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler that are guaranteed. And then the other 2, it's who's having the better night, and it's a matchup thing. And so I thought versus a smaller Hornets team like this, in theory, he could take advantage of smaller guys in the paint. Somebody switched onto him that hasn't played out yet so far, with a Hornets team that definitely has a lot of small guys. He hasn't got in position in the paint or anything like that yet. But other than that, I think you see the positives of what he can provide for sure. I think the hedging, the showing and recovering is going to get sharper. The rotations are going to get sharper as they figure this out, because it is a new coverage for the starting lineup specifically. I think they kind of got used to the switching base that they've had, even though there's definitely mix-ups. And of course, guys playing different units, they throw in different coverages all the time. I think for the starting lineup specifically is something new. And you're playing Tyler Hero and Kevin Love, and that's where it becomes difficult. You're covering up for a lot there, and that's why I'm sort of with you when it comes to the Kevin Love closing thing, and that's why I wanted to ask you that, because I think it's really tough right now. There's no easy answer, because you would like to have his shooting, the exercise, and the rebounding matters. The rebounding matters versus bigger teams. I think you can't let teams get easy offensive rebounds and second chance points. The Heat have to win the field goal attempts battle by forcing turnovers. They're not necessarily going to offensive rebound you to death, but you got to win those things. So I think I see the vision of Kevin Love's fit. I'm with you. I'm not sold on him being a full-time starter and closer because I think you can be fine with him as a starter, and then you can kind of figure out what when is the right time to close with him. I think obviously tonight he was having a good night. A lot of other people weren't, so it's pretty understandable. He's obviously still new. The Hornets are not some juggernaut team where you got to be really conservative. Like I understand closing with him tonight, but some of those defensive mistakes at the end in crunch time were, I think, part of his fault as well. And some of it is really just his physical limitations, man. And that's where you're kind of trying to cover up. And that's why you got to be extremely sharp with the rotations because it's going to take him a little bit longer to recover, right? That's the whole thing with showing and recovering is the recovery, right? Because the others can only hold that down for so long. That's where the easy shots come from. If you can close up that window of time just by a little bit, those extra milliseconds, that's where the stop. That's the difference between a stop and an easy shot, right? And I think that those little nuances will get ironed out as the season goes on. Obviously, not a whole lot left before the playoffs, but yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Kevin Love going forward. Glad to see him hit some shots tonight because I was getting some Duncan vibes after the first two misses in the sense of just like, oh my God, when is he going to hit one? This is, there's just so much pressure after each miss for the next one to go in. So I'm glad he got going a bit there. I also think there was a lot of times where they missed him, especially at the top of the key. Like he was open and guys are completely helping off of him, which we thought we weren't going to see much. A lot of times last night that the Bucks were not, they were kind of staying home on Love, and Bam and Jimmy were able, and Tyler were able to get some shots off closer into the paint because of it. Not that last night was good in any way, but tonight you saw a lot of helping off of Love, and they just don't feed him enough. Like they got to get used to that, and they got to feed him. They got to take advantage whenever a team does help off because that's an easy shot for him, especially for somebody as tall as him. Like once you have a smaller person trying to recover there, like on that closeout after they're helping off so much, like that shot is going up. You know what I mean? It's hard to recover and contest somebody who's taller than you's shot. And sorry for talking so much. You could tell I'm not used to being a host here. I'm just interested to see now that we've got these new elements, right? It kind of mixes things up, which has made the season a little bit more interesting. It's unfortunate that it's resulted in two straight disheartening losses, even though they were very different from each other. And I think the Heat have got to figure some things out, man, if that wasn't obvious enough. So thank you, Brady, for joining me. Thank you to everybody for watching. You probably won't have to hear from me as the host for a long time. So you can take some solace in that. Shout out to sponsors. Shout out Prize Picks. Promo code 5. Shout out Better Edge. Promo code 5RSN. And thank you guys for listening. We'll be back soon.
Thank you for listening to the Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network.